Marcus Chen pressed his back against the cold metal wall of the maintenance shaft, listening to the heavy footsteps of the Korthak patrol passing overhead. His heart hammered against his ribs as he counted the seconds. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi. The footsteps faded into the distance, and he released the breath he'd been holding for what felt like an eternity. The invasion had come without warning 6 months ago. Earth's defenses, impressive by human standards, had crumbled like paper against the Korthak war machine. Their ships blotted out the sky, their weapons turned cities to glass, and their soldiers swept through the resistance like a plague of metal and fury. Within weeks, the proud armies of Earth had either surrendered, died, or scattered into the shadows. Marcus had been none of those things when the war started. He wasn't a soldier, wasn't a hero, wasn't even particularly brave. He was a janitor at the Meridian spaceport, a 42-year-old man who spent his days mopping floors and emptying trash cans. His greatest achievement had been winning the Employee Safety Award 3 years running for never missing a shift. When the Korthak dropships screamed down from the burning sky, most people ran. Marcus had been in Sub-Level 7, fixing a broken cleaning unit, and by the time he realized what was happening, the facility was already occupied. The Korthak were massive beings, standing nearly 8 feet tall with thick gray-green skin that looked like living armor. Their heads were elongated, with 4 eyes that glowed amber in the dark and mandibles that clicked when they spoke their harsh, guttural language. They carried energy weapons that could punch through steel plate and wore powered armor that made them nearly invulnerable to human weapons. To them, humans were insects, weak, pathetic creatures barely worth the effort to exterminate. Marcus had spent the first week hiding in the maintenance tunnels, surviving on emergency rations and water from the backup systems. He'd watched through security monitors as the Korthak established their base of operations in the main terminal. They'd brought in strange machinery, set up communication arrays, and begun processing human prisoners for reasons Marcus didn't want to think about too deeply. It was during his second week in hiding that he made his first mistake. Or what the Korthak would later consider their first mistake. Marcus had been checking the air filtration systems in Section C when a patrol of 3 Korthak soldiers entered the maintenance level. They were searching for something. Or someone. Their amber eyes swept the corridors with mechanical precision, their heavy boots clanging against the metal grating. Marcus froze behind a cluster of pipes, knowing that any movement would give him away. The lead Korthak stopped just meters from his hiding spot and tilted its massive head. It said something in its alien tongue, and the other 2 responded with what sounded like laughter, a grinding mechanical noise that made Marcus's skin crawl. Then, impossibly, the creature looked directly at him. Their eyes met across the dimly lit corridor. Marcus felt his bladder nearly give way as the alien's mandibles spread in what might have been a smile. The Korthak raised its weapon, a sleek energy rifle that hummed with barely contained power. Marcus closed his eyes and waited for death. Instead, he heard more of that grinding laughter. When he opened his eyes, the 3 aliens were walking away, their leader making dismissive gestures with its free hand. Marcus caught fragments of their conversation through his emergency translator, something about harmless vermin and not worth the energy cell. They had seen him. They had looked right at him, defenseless and cornered, and decided he wasn't even worth killing. The humiliation burned worse than fear. Marcus had been dismissed, written off as irrelevant. In the grand scope of their conquest, he was nothing more than a bug hiding in the walls. The Korthak had made their first fatal error, and they didn't even realize it. Over the following days, Marcus began to understand his unique position. He was beneath their notice, invisible in his insignificance. The Korthak saw him occasionally, a figure in maintenance coveralls fixing a broken system or cleaning a spill. But their massive brains categorized him as part of the infrastructure, no more threatening than a cleaning robot. This invisibility became his greatest weapon. Marcus began to explore the facility with new purpose. He mapped every corridor, every service tunnel, every access panel and emergency shaft. He learned the patrol schedules, identified weak points in their security, and most importantly, he began to understand their technology. The Korthak were supremely confident in their superiority. They left their equipment unguarded, their communication arrays unencrypted, their weapon systems unlocked. Why would they secure anything against humans? What could insects do to lions? Marcus started small. A loose connection here, a rerouted data cable there, nothing dramatic, nothing that would be noticed immediately. He tampered with their life support systems, making tiny adjustments that would cause minor inefficiencies. He altered their waste processing units to run at suboptimal levels. He even managed to introduce small bugs into their communication software that would cause occasional static or brief delays. The Korthak noticed the problems, but attributed them to the inferior human construction of the facility. They brought in repair teams, who fixed the obvious issues while missing the subtle sabotage Marcus had woven throughout the systems. It was like trying to remove a virus that had already infected every cell of an organism. 3 weeks into his one-man war, Marcus scored his first real victory. He'd been observing a maintenance team working on one of their power distribution nodes when he noticed something interesting. The Korthak engineer was having trouble with a coupling that kept coming loose. Every time he tightened it, it would work for a few hours before loosening again. The alien was growing increasingly frustrated, its mandibles clicking in agitation. Marcus realized he could help, not the Korthak, but himself. That night, he accessed the power distribution network and began a systematic campaign of electronic warfare. He identified the critical systems that kept their base operational and began introducing cascade failures. Not all at once, that would be too obvious. Instead, he created a web of dependencies and vulnerabilities that would trigger at precisely the right moments. The next morning, the Korthak base experienced its first major system failure. The main power grid went down for 6 hours, taking with it life support, communications, and defensive systems. Emergency power kicked in, but several secondary systems failed when the backup generators couldn't handle the full load. The Korthak brought in specialists from their ships to investigate. They found evidence of cascading failures, but nothing that pointed to sabotage. The diagnostic reports blamed incompatible human technology and recommended a full system replacement. Marcus watched from the shadows as they tore apart systems he had spent weeks learning to exploit. But for every weakness they closed, he found 2 more. The facility was a maze of interconnected systems, and he had become its ghost in the machine. As the days passed, Marcus grew bolder. He began targeting their weapons, introducing subtle calibration errors that would cause their energy rifles to overheat after extended use. He tampered with their armor systems, creating microscopic stress fractures in the power cells that would fail at critical moments. He even managed to corrupt their tactical databases, introducing false information about human resistance movements that sent patrols chasing ghosts across the continent. But his greatest triumph came when he discovered their real purpose on Earth. Marcus had been monitoring their communications when he intercepted a transmission from the Korthak command ship. The message was in their military cipher, but Marcus had been studying their language for months. What he learned made his blood run cold. Earth wasn't just being conquered, it was being prepared for harvest. The Korthak weren't interested in the planet itself, but in its population. Humans, it turned out, had a unique brain chemistry that produced a compound the Korthak used for their most advanced technologies. The processing centers being built weren't for prisoners. They were for extraction. The entire human race was being turned into a drug farm. That night, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He had been content to be a nuisance, a minor irritation in the side of an overwhelming enemy. But now, he understood the stakes. This wasn't just about resistance anymore. It was about survival of the species. He began planning something the Korthak would never expect from a harmless maintenance worker. Something that would turn their greatest strength, their arrogant dismissal of human capability, into their downfall. Marcus Chen, the janitor they had overlooked, was about to remind the Korthak why humans had earned their place among the stars, and he was going to do it with nothing more than determination, ingenuity, and access to every system that kept their base running. The enemy had made their first fatal error. They were about to discover just how costly overlooking a human could be. In the depths of the maintenance tunnels, surrounded by the humming machinery that had become his domain, Marcus began to smile for the first time since the invasion began. The Korthak thought they knew everything about human weakness. They were about to get an education in human strength. Marcus spent the next 2 weeks preparing for something no Korthak commander could have anticipated from their intelligence reports. While their analysts had correctly assessed human military capabilities as primitive, they had failed to account for human creativity when backed into a corner. More critically, they had never considered what a single motivated human with intimate knowledge of their systems could accomplish. The plan Marcus developed was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its potential consequences. The Korthak had built their base using human infrastructure, connecting their advanced systems to Earth's power grid, communication networks, and environmental controls. They had done this because it was efficient, because human systems were beneath their notice, and because they believed no human could possibly understand their technology well enough to exploit it. They were wrong on every count. Marcus had discovered that the Korthak power systems operated on a quantum resonance frequency that could be manipulated through the base's harmonic dampeners. These dampeners were originally designed to prevent vibrations from damaging sensitive equipment, but Marcus realized they could be recalibrated to create specific interference patterns. With the right adjustments, he could turn the entire facility into a massive resonance chamber. The beauty of the plan was that it would use the Korthak's own power against them. Their quantum reactors, so superior to human technology, would become the instruments of their destruction. And because the sabotage would be routed through human systems they considered irrelevant, they would never see it coming until it was too late. Marcus began his work in the sub-basement, where the primary harmonic dampeners were housed. The equipment was old but functional, installed when the spaceport was built 30 years ago. He spent 3 days carefully recalibrating each unit, creating a network of interference generators that could be activated simultaneously. The real challenge came in accessing the Korthak power distribution network. Their quantum reactors were protected by security systems that would have challenged the best human hackers, but Marcus had an advantage no hacker possessed: physical access to the infrastructure they were connected to. He didn't need to break through their security. He just needed to find where their systems interfaced with human technology. The connection point turned out to be in the main electrical room, where Korthak engineers had installed a quantum-to-electrical converter to power human systems they still needed operational. The converter was heavily shielded, but Marcus noticed something the alien engineers had missed. It was connected to the building's grounding system. Every electrical system in the facility was connected to that same ground, including the harmonic dampeners. Marcus spent an entire night carefully installing bypass circuits that would allow him to inject specific frequencies into the Korthak power grid. The work was delicate, requiring him to manipulate components while the systems remained active. One mistake would either electrocute him or trigger alarms that would bring every Korthak soldier in the base running. He finished just as the morning patrol began their rounds, slipping back into the maintenance tunnels as alien footsteps echoed through the corridors above. His heart was pounding, but not from fear, from anticipation. For the first time since the invasion began, he felt like he was fighting back. But Marcus knew that destroying the base would accomplish nothing if it didn't send a message that the broader Korthak fleet would understand. He needed to ensure that whatever happened here would be broadcast to their command ships, showing them exactly how their inferior enemies had achieved the impossible. The solution came from an unexpected source, the Korthak's own arrogance. Marcus had been monitoring their communications when he noticed that the base commander was scheduled to give a progress report to the fleet admiral in 3 days. The report would be transmitted live to every ship in the Korthak fleet, a chance for the commander to demonstrate the efficiency of the human processing operation. It would be the perfect audience for Marcus's demonstration. The next phase of his plan required him to become visible to the Korthak in a way he had carefully avoided for months. He needed to be captured, processed, and brought before their command staff. But he also needed to maintain access to the facility's systems until the moment his trap was sprung. Marcus spent a day preparing what he called his insurance policy, a dead man's switch built into the environmental controls that would activate his resonance weapon if his biometric readings flatlined or if he failed to input a specific code every 12 hours. Then he began the dangerous process of allowing himself to be caught. He started by being sloppy during his maintenance rounds, leaving tools in visible locations and failing to properly conceal his access points. The Korthak security teams began noticing signs of human activity in areas that should have been empty. They increased their patrols and started investigating the maintenance levels more thoroughly. Marcus led them on a careful chase, always staying one step ahead but leaving enough of a trail to keep them interested. He wanted to be captured, but on his terms and in a location where he could maintain access to the critical systems. The moment came when he was working on an air filtration unit near the main command center. Marcus heard the patrol approaching and made a show of trying to hide, knocking over a tool cart in his haste. The crash echoed through the corridor, and within seconds he was surrounded by 4 Korthak soldiers with weapons trained on him. The lead soldier said something in their language that Marcus's translator rendered as persistent vermin. The alien seemed more annoyed than pleased by the capture, as if Marcus had been causing minor inconvenience rather than conducting sophisticated sabotage. They dragged him to a holding cell in the detention level, a stark chamber with energy barriers instead of bars. Marcus was relieved to see that the cell's environmental controls were connected to the same network he had compromised. Even imprisoned, he maintained access to his weapon. The base commander arrived an hour later, a massive Korthak with elaborate tattoos covering his armor and scars that spoke of numerous battles. His name was Thakmor, and according to intercepted communications, he had conquered 17 worlds for the Empire. Earth was supposed to be his easiest victory, a simple harvesting operation that would require minimal effort. Thakmor studied Marcus through the energy barrier with unconcealed disdain. When he spoke, his words were translated by speakers built into the cell walls. "You have been causing minor disruptions to our operations," the commander said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to shake the walls. "Explain your actions." Marcus looked up at the towering alien and smiled. "I'm just doing my job." "Your job?" Thakmor's mandibles clicked in what might have been confusion. "You are a maintenance worker. Your species has surrendered. You have no job except to await processing." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the circumstances. "My job is to keep this facility running smoothly. And from my perspective, you and your soldiers are causing significant operational problems." The Korthak commander stared at him for a long moment, then made that grinding sound that passed for laughter among his species. "You believe you can resist the might of the Korthak Empire with cleaning equipment? I believe you've underestimated what humans can accomplish when we put our minds to it," Marcus said. "Your species is technologically superior, physically stronger, and vastly more numerous, but you have one critical weakness." "And what is that, little insect?" Marcus's smile widened. "You think like conquerors instead of engineers. You see systems to control instead of systems to understand. That's going to cost you everything." Thakmore's eyes narrowed. You speak as if you have achieved something significant. But you are captured. Your resistance is ended. And tomorrow, you will be processed with the rest of your species. In 2 days, I will report to Fleet Admiral Vorthak that the human harvesting operation has proceeded without meaningful opposition. About that, Marcus said, checking the time display on the cell wall. I should probably mention that I've made some modifications to your base's operating systems. Nothing dramatic, just some adjustments to improve efficiency. The commander leaned closer to the energy barrier. What modifications? Well, for starters, I've reconfigured your harmonic dampeners to create a quantum resonance pattern that will turn your own power reactors into a massive bomb. The energy discharge should be visible from orbit. Thakmore's mandibles spread wide in obvious alarm. You lie. Human technology cannot interface with our quantum systems. You're right, Marcus agreed cheerfully. Human technology can't. But your technology can interface with human systems, and I know human systems better than anyone. I've been playing in your computer networks for months, and you never even noticed. The commander activated his communication device, barking orders in the Korthak language. Within minutes, teams of technicians were swarming through the facility, checking power levels and running diagnostics on their quantum reactors. Marcus watched through the cell's security monitor as chaos erupted throughout the base. Alert klaxons blared, emergency lights flashed, and Korthak soldiers ran through corridors that Marcus knew better than they did. The sight filled him with savage satisfaction. Your technicians won't find anything wrong, he called to Thakmore, who was speaking rapidly into his communicator. The resonance pattern won't activate until tomorrow, right in the middle of your report to the Fleet Admiral. I wanted to make sure you had an audience when you learned what humans are really capable of. The commander turned back to Marcus, his amber eyes blazing with rage. Deactivate it! I can't, Marcus said truthfully. The system is automated now. It will activate exactly 24 hours from now unless I input a specific code every 12 hours. And if you kill me or if my biometric readings indicate I'm being tortured, it activates immediately. Then input the code. Marcus shook his head. The next input isn't scheduled for 6 hours. But even if I wanted to stop it, I couldn't. The code sequence is stored in my brain, and if I try to access it before the scheduled time, a neural implant will scramble my memories. The lie came easily. Marcus had no neural implant, but he was betting that Korthak medical knowledge of human neurology was limited. Based on Thakmore's expression, the gamble was paying off. You are bluffing, the commander said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. Test me, Marcus challenged. Order your medics to scan my brain. They'll find the implant. Then decide if you want to risk having your quantum reactors turn into the galaxy's largest firework display during a live transmission to your entire fleet. Thakmore stood frozen for several seconds, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he activated his communicator again and issued new orders. Marcus caught enough fragments to understand that the commander was calling in their medical team to verify his claims. As alien footsteps echoed through the detention level, Marcus settled back to wait. The next 24 hours would determine whether one overlooked human could accomplish what entire armies had failed to achieve. But for the first time since the invasion began, Marcus felt something he had almost forgotten: hope. The Korthak were about to learn that their first fatal error was far more costly than they could have imagined. The Korthak medical team arrived within an hour, their scanning equipment humming as they examined Marcus through the energy barrier. The lead medic was smaller than the warriors, but his 4 eyes held the same contemptuous intelligence that marked his species. He spoke to Thakmore in rapid bursts of their guttural language while studying readouts on a device that looked like a cross between a tablet and a crystal formation. Marcus lay still on the cell's metal bench, projecting calm confidence while his heart hammered against his ribs. Everything depended on selling this deception. The Korthak were supremely confident in their technological superiority, but that same confidence made them prone to overthinking when faced with something they didn't understand. After several minutes of increasingly agitated discussion, the medic activated a translation protocol. "Human," he said, his voice carrying the mechanical tone of automated translation. "Our scans detect unusual neural activity in your cranial cavity. However, the patterns are inconsistent with any known implant technology." "That's because it's not Korthak technology," Marcus replied, sitting up slowly. "It's human military grade. We may be primitive by your standards, but we're not stupid. Our resistance leaders have been preparing for scenarios like this since your ships first appeared." The lie was becoming easier to maintain. Marcus had noticed that the Korthak seemed genuinely surprised by any evidence of human technological capability, as if their intelligence reports had convinced them that Earth's population was barely above Stone Age development. Thakmor leaned closer to the barrier. "Explain this implant." "Neural memory encryption," Marcus said, borrowing terms from science fiction movies he'd watched years ago. "The access codes for my sabotage systems are stored in protected memory sectors. Any attempt to extract them forcibly triggers a cascade failure that destroys the data and activates all automated systems immediately." The medic consulted his scanner again, then spoke to Thakmor in their native language. Marcus caught fragments about primitive but effective and organic encryption matrix. The Korthak were trying to understand human technology through their own advanced framework, and their assumptions were working in Marcus's favor. "How long until the next code input is required?" Thakmor demanded. Marcus checked the time display. 4 hours and 37 minutes. "But Commander, I should mention that I've been monitoring your communications. I know about the progress report to Fleet Admiral Vorthak. I know about the human harvesting operation. And I know what you really think of my species." The massive alien's mandibles clicked in agitation. "Your opinion of our assessment is irrelevant." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but your Admiral's opinion of your competence isn't. How do you think he'll react when his live progress report is interrupted by a quantum explosion that destroys your entire base? What will the other Korthak commanders think when they learn that a single human maintenance worker defeated the conqueror of 17 worlds?" For the first time since Marcus had been captured, Thakmor looked genuinely unsettled. The commander's amber eyes narrowed as he considered the implications. In a hierarchy as rigid as the Korthak Empire, failure was not tolerated, and public humiliation was a career-ending catastrophe. "You will disable your sabotage systems," Thakmor ordered. "In return, your death will be swift instead of drawn out." Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the cell walls. "You're not understanding the situation, Commander. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm offering you a chance to salvage what's left of your reputation." "Explain." "Evacuate the base. Cancel the progress report. Tell your Admiral that you've encountered unexpected resistance and need additional resources. Take your fleet and leave Earth." Marcus met the alien's gaze steadily. "Do that, and I'll disable the resonance weapon." Thakmor's response was immediate and violent. The commander slammed his armored fist against the wall beside the energy barrier, leaving a dent in the metal plating. "The Korthak Empire does not negotiate with insects. We do not retreat from primitive worlds." "Then you're going to die here," Marcus said simply, "along with every soldier in this base. And tomorrow, when Fleet Admiral Vorthak sees his favorite commander turned into radioactive vapor on live transmission, he's going to know that humans aren't the helpless victims your intelligence reports claimed we were." The truth was that Marcus had no intention of negotiating. The resonance weapon couldn't be disabled because it was already active, building quantum pressure in the harmonic dampeners throughout the facility. The 12-hour timer was real, but it wasn't connected to any biometric monitoring or neural implants. It was a simple countdown protocol he had built into the environmental system, as unstoppable as gravity. But Thakmor didn't need to know that. The commander was already under pressure from his superiors to maintain their conquest timeline, and the possibility of public failure was clearly affecting his judgment. "I require time to consider your proposal," Thakmor said finally. "You have 4 hours," Marcus reminded him. "After that, the next code input window opens, and I'll need to access the system regardless of any agreements we might reach." The commander left without another word, his heavy footsteps echoing through the detention level. Marcus settled back on the cell's bench and closed his eyes, listening to the subtle vibrations that thrummed through the facility's structure. If he concentrated, he could feel the quantum resonance building in the dampeners, a growing pressure that would soon reach critical threshold. The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Marcus watched through the cell's security monitor as evacuation procedures began throughout the base. Korthak soldiers loaded equipment onto transport vessels, while technicians desperately tried to locate the source of increasingly erratic power fluctuations. Emergency teams raced through corridors, following false leads and chasing system ghosts that Marcus had built into the facility's infrastructure. Thakmor returned with 30 minutes remaining until the scheduled code input. The commander's armor was scorched from some kind of explosion, and his mandibles clicked continuously in obvious agitation. "My technicians cannot locate your sabotage systems," he admitted. "The quantum resonance readings are increasing, but the source appears to be distributed throughout the facility's infrastructure." "That's because it is," Marcus said. "I've been working on this for months, Commander. Every system, every component, every circuit in this base has been compromised. You can't find it because it's everywhere. The evacuation is nearly complete. My ships are prepared to withdraw to a safe distance. Input your code." Marcus sat up and smiled. "I'm afraid there's been a slight misunderstanding, Commander. I don't have a code." Thakmor's 4 eyes blazed with sudden fury. "You stated that—" "I said I needed to input a code every 12 hours. I never said I had one." Marcus's voice remained calm despite the alien's obvious rage. "The system is fully automated. It will activate in 28 minutes regardless of anything I do or don't do." "Then why?" "Because I wanted you to evacuate your soldiers," Marcus said. "I'm not a monster, Thakmor. I don't want to kill anyone unnecessarily, but I also can't let you continue processing humans like livestock." The commander's mandibles spread wide in what Marcus had learned was an expression of extreme anger. "You have doomed yourself for nothing. The fleet will simply establish a new base and continue operations." "Maybe," Marcus agreed, "but they'll do it knowing that humans fight back. They'll do it knowing that their superior technology couldn't protect them from one overlooked maintenance worker, and they'll do it knowing that if they're not careful, there might be others like me hidden in their systems." Thakmor activated his communicator and barked orders in the Korthak language. Through the cell's monitor, Marcus watched the final evacuation craft lift off from the facility's landing pad. The base was now empty except for the 2 of them. "You could have left with them," Marcus pointed out. "A Korthak commander does not abandon his post," Thakmor replied with grim dignity. "If this base is destroyed, I will die with it." Marcus felt a flicker of respect for the alien. They were enemies, representing species locked in a war for survival, but there was something admirable about Thakmor's refusal to flee in the face of defeat. "For what it's worth," Marcus said, "you're a better commander than your intelligence reports suggested you were dealing with. In a fair fight, with equal technology, your species would have won easily." "But this was not a fair fight," Thakmor observed. "No," Marcus agreed. "It wasn't. You had superior technology, superior numbers, superior firepower. All I had was the advantage of being underestimated." The countdown reached 10 minutes. Throughout the facility, quantum pressure readings spiked beyond safe parameters. Emergency systems began shutting down non-critical functions in a futile attempt to contain the building resonance cascade. Marcus closed his eyes and thought about the human prisoners in processing centers across the globe. He thought about the resistance fighters who had died believing their cause was hopeless. He thought about the billions of humans who had surrendered in the face of overwhelming odds. They would all know soon that the fight wasn't over. The Korthak fleet would receive Thakmor's evacuation reports, along with sensor readings of the quantum explosion that destroyed their secure base. They would analyze the data and realize that humans possessed capabilities their intelligence reports had failed to identify. More importantly, other humans would learn about this. Resistance groups would understand that the alien technology wasn't invulnerable, that their occupation forces could be defeated through ingenuity and determination. The story of one maintenance worker who brought down a Korthak base would spread across the underground networks, inspiring others to find their own ways to fight back. 5 minutes, Marcus announced unnecessarily. The quantum resonance was now audible as a low humming that seemed to come from the walls themselves. Thakmor stood silently beside the energy barrier, his massive frame somehow conveying a sense of resigned dignity. "Your species will remember you as a hero," he said finally. "I'm not a hero," Marcus replied. "I'm just a janitor who got tired of watching his world get dirty." At 2 minutes before detonation, the facility's main computer announced the evacuation completion in both Korthak and English. All personnel had safely reached minimum distance. Only biological signatures remaining were in Detention Cell 7. Marcus thought about Sarah, the young security guard who used to chat with him during his midnight shifts. He thought about Dr. Peterson, the scientist who always thanked him for keeping the lab clean. He thought about the coffee shop owner who knew his order by heart and the bus driver who waited an extra minute when Marcus was running late. They were probably dead or captured now, but maybe somehow this would help others like them survive. 1 minute, he said aloud. Thakmor's mandibles clicked once in what might have been acknowledgement or farewell. The quantum resonance reached critical threshold. Throughout the facility, harmonic dampeners synchronized their frequencies, creating a standing wave pattern that turned the entire base into a massive resonance chamber. The Korthak quantum reactors, designed to contain and channel enormous energies, found themselves trapped in a feedback loop that their safety systems couldn't compensate for. In the final seconds, Marcus smiled. The Korthak had learned an important lesson about human nature. When cornered, when facing extinction, when overlooked and dismissed as irrelevant, humans didn't surrender. They improvised. The explosion was visible from 3 continents. The Korthak fleet received the sensor data along with Thakmor's final transmission, explaining how a single human had accomplished what entire armies couldn't achieve. Fleet Admiral Vorthak stared at the readings in disbelief before ordering a complete reassessment of human capabilities. Across Earth, resistance groups intercepted fragments of Korthak communications discussing the Meridian incident. Within hours, the story had spread through every underground network on the planet. A maintenance worker named Marcus Chen had turned alien technology against itself, proving that the occupation could be defeated. The Korthak would continue their harvest operations, but they would do so with new respect for human ingenuity and new safeguards against human sabotage. They would never again dismiss a human as harmless based on appearance or occupation. And in hidden bunkers and secret facilities around the world, engineers and hackers and maintenance workers and janitors began studying Korthak technology with fresh eyes, looking for ways to turn the aliens' greatest strengths into their most fatal weaknesses. Marcus Chen had shown them that the enemy's first fatal error was underestimating human determination. Now it was time to teach them that it wouldn't be their last.